Good afternoon, everyone out there in internet land. Thank you for joining me for yet another video here at Retro Geek Gaming, where we like to talk about stuff that's retro, stuff that's geek, and of course gaming related. Now today we're going to talk about geek, or at least geek for me. We're going to talk about Spider-Man, something that I meant to talk about a couple weeks ago, I believe, when it was first talked about, but I really wanted to take my time, digest my thoughts, really just sort of think about, hey, what would be 4 or 5 great villains to use for the next Spider-Man film? Because what am I talking about? Well, I mean, if you remember, I think it might have been last week, maybe it was the week before, people that are attached to the project, whether they're producers, directors, writers, whoever, are basically talking about the next Spider-Man movie, Spider-Man 4, the next one with Tom Holland in it, which I assume is going to be part of another trilogy, is going to use a villain, or they want to use a villain, I should say, that has never been done in live action before. So, this excludes the Venoms, this excludes the Green Goblin, this excludes Mysterio, obviously at this point Kraven and all that stuff like that, because they already have live action adaptations. So I started to think in my head, well, who would be some good fits for villains, anti-heroes, whatever, for the next Spider-Man film, and I think I got a pretty good list here, but this is just my opinion, of course, so if you guys have an opinion, or if you have one that maybe I missed and didn't think about, make sure to put it down in the comments down below. I'd love to hear what you guys think about this topic, because just like everything that I talk about, I think it's just very fascinating stuff to sit around and contemplate this and talk about this kind of stuff, you know? So join me for this video discussion if you will, and of course if you like this, I'm not going to really beg or do the whole spiel, but you know, like, subscribe, and all that stuff like that. But again, no pressure from me, I'm just not that kind of guy. But let's go ahead and get into the list, shall we, of villains that have not been done, and as far as I know, they're talking about movies that, you know, live action actors that haven't been done before that probably would be a good fit for the next film, shall we? My number one pick, and again, you know that when it comes to these picks, they're not really like in any particular order. I just say number one because it's my first one. But I do have one that I'm kind of saving towards the end that I think would be the best fit. But one, just because we haven't had a female opponent go against Spider-Man yet, and it seems like it's been teased before, Felicia Hardy, the Black Cat. I just think that it'd be great, especially now that we have this version of Spider-Man that doesn't technically have Mary Jane, that still loves her, but she might have the memories of, like, Spider-Man, for example. So you can have somebody that he gets to know, and somebody who helps him, and someone who understands him as Spider-Man, and that aspect of it, but is also technically a villain, and kind of betrays him, and does this, that, and the other. I think it'd be a very interesting angle to use. Or they could use Silver Sable, I'm cool with that too, but I think Black Cat makes the most sense as far as, again, a personal angle, and I'm probably throwing too much into the whole personal angle thing. It just seems to be what they do now, because all the villains of Spider-Man in the past have been personal. You know, Doc Ock, he's known. The Adrian Toomes Vulture, he dated his daughter. Like, it's just, it's the kind of thing that it seems like, you know, you're kind of going with the personal angle on all this. And if you're going to use a personal angle, who better than Black Cat to be essentially another love interest? Not say the love triangle, because that's always outdone. It's not only a love triangle because it's one of those kind of things where it's like he's only with her because of trouble with Mary Jane, which he's in now. And yeah, I think it'd be an interesting fit. And if they really are going to do more of the street level crime stuff, which is great for me, keep it level. You don't have to keep doing space and multiple universes. You don't have to keep doing all that stuff. You can just keep it low. And who better to do as a street level villain than Felicia Hardy? Because she can be a cat burglar, robbing people, causing trouble. But you can also just keep it based in reality with relationships and crime and action and all that stuff. But that's just one pick. Another pick for me would probably be Tombstone. Just because if we want to continue with the whole redemption arc that he kind of seemed like he was doing with No Way Home, seems like a good fit to me. Somebody who had a troubled past, was experimented on, turned to crime, and is now basically just this big brute that can't be stopped. But he figures out how to stop him with maybe like some different advantages in webbing, and just technology and stuff like that. And could probably even start to work to redeem him in some way. But it doesn't really fit into the whole personal narrative nearly as much as some of these other picks are. But I do still think that Tombstone would be a pretty interesting pick, at least for me. But my next pick, I think, could work even better than that. Because it's a character who's already been introduced into this timeline. And a villain that hasn't been done before. And before I mention that person, because you're probably thinking of somebody else, I'm not talking about Scorpion. Because we had Matt Gargan introduced in the movies, and Scorpion would make a good fit, right? But I don't know if they mean that angle of, like, never been introduced. Like, Vulture was never really introduced before. We never had Adrian Toomes. We never had anything like that before. So here we are. We could easily use Scorpion. I think that'd be a good pick. But Scorpion is a little bit too mainstream, meaning that he's one of the more popular characters out there. And that's the reason why I started with Black Cat, was because she's one of the more popular characters. And this character, well, I mean, let's face it, all the Spider-Man villains are popular. So what am I talking about? I mean, we're not talking about somebody who's obviously obscure. You want to have somebody that's a big name enough to kind of draw the audience's imagination out and go, ooh. So yeah, Scorpion is definitely on that list for sure, but it's not who I was thinking of. I was thinking of none other than our boy Ned Leeds, a.k.a. Hobgoblin. And I would like to see them go with that angle, because I know that's kind of been retconned and thrown around that Ned Leeds wasn't the Hobgoblin, etc., etc. It's one of those botched kind of comic book reveals, but I like the idea of it for this franchise because Ned Leeds is already set up. He's there, and he's been introduced, and now we have this whole stuff going on. But what do I mean by that? Well, we already have this spell set up from the last movie where he sort of lost his memories of Peter Parker and all that stuff like that, but he remembers Spider-Man, and I wouldn't be surprised if there's some kind of an after effect, right? Where maybe the people that knew both start to have these visions and these flashes and stuff like that, and it messes with Ned's mind, driving him insane, maybe even driving him to Oscorp if we start to introduce Oscorp into this. But this, of course, this whole idea works off of the trilogy of leading up to the Green Goblin. So this is just me, of course, but if we lead up to the idea of getting an MCU Norman Osborn and moving into a Green Goblin, then this makes sense, because maybe Norman Osborn is messing around with this kind of tech, starts to use Ned to test it out. He goes insane and steals a costume, makes it his own, steals the tech, and starts to use the glider and all that kind of stuff to become the Hobgoblin. And of course, he's just driven mad because he has all these flashes going on between somebody who he doesn't know but remembers, but thinks he knows Spider-Man but doesn't know him. And I just think it'd be a very interesting personal angle as far as would you fight your friend. But that, of course, is just one angle on that, because it depends upon what they want to do, really. On another side note, the actor for Mr. Negative has stated that he would love to be involved in a live-action adaptation. So Mr. Negative is definitely on that table. And really, Mr. Negative is even one of those kind of characters that hasn't really even come into the fray at all, except for the recent Spider-Man games. So maybe this could be a sort of resurgence into that, because you know how these companies like to do this, right? Like, we got Shadow shown off in the next Sonic Generations game, and that's going to sort of leak into the whole Shadow being in Sonic the Hedgehog 3, the movie. So I would not be surprised at all if they use that as maybe with Spider-Man DLC to also be like Mr. Negative is going to be in the next movie, to just have it sort of all be together. But would they do that? I don't know. I really don't. And then lastly, but by no means at all the least, in fact, I think this is probably the best angle they could go with, outside of perhaps the Black Cat, or even Ned Leeds being the Hobgoblin. The idea of this final villain just seems like it's the best one to use because of the whole identity thing, and sort of what they were sort of hinting at with No Way Home, and the fact is that Nick Fury wasn't really Nick Fury. And so maybe he could be a Skrull or something like that. And depending upon if you want to start having this come over from the Sony Spider-Man verse, his brother already has a movie technically. And of course, if you haven't figured it out by now, I'm talking about the Chameleon. The Chameleon seems like a great choice to do. Only because of the fact is that Chameleon hasn't been done in live action. They can even pull from several comic sources and say that he has a personal angle with Nick Fury, and Nick Fury has of course shown up in the other Spider-Man movies. And then of course that whole identity thing that we had from No Way Home with Mysterio, where Nick Fury was really in space, so he was being played on Earth by, a Skrull and all that stuff like that. So obviously they can shapeshift. And just the idea of the Chameleon, again, messing with maybe Peter Parker's life, or even pretending to be Spider-Man, to throw the name of Spider-Man. So then you got this whole Spider-Man and Spider-Man thing, and who knows, maybe if you still want to continue to throw some craziness in there and multiverse stuff, maybe the other two Spider-Men come back, maybe Tobey and Andrew come back, so now you got this big four-way Spider-Man. People are confused, who's Spider-Man, who isn't Spider-Man. And maybe the symbiote even comes into play somehow, so now he wears a black suit, and that's the way to distinguish him from the other Spider-Man, I don't know. Maybe we can even do Miles Morales. That would be interesting to do, but again, we have Sony doing their thing with, the Into the Spider-Verse, Across the Spider-Verse stuff, so would they want to maybe throw in live-action Miles Morales? Well, maybe, because we also didn't get the Prowler like we were sort of promised, with Donald Glover, but the Prowler, I think, should be saved more for if we do get a Miles Morales angle or Miles Morales movie, just because of that whole personal angle of it being his uncle. I think that just makes more sense, but Chameleon makes a ton of sense to me too, just because of, again, personal stakes of his name being on the line and stuff like that. But that's just my list, guys. I didn't want to make it too long, so hopefully it wasn't too long, and hopefully you weren't bored to tears. But what do you think about it? Again, like I said in the beginning of the video, you're welcome to like, subscribe, and leave your comments on it down below. And I hope that you guys have yourself a fantastic weekend. I don't know when I'm going to make my next video, but I do have a few ideas percolating up in this slow brain of mine. So just, hold out, hope, and maybe I'll start making content more commonly here, like I keep intending to do, but I get caught up with life and everything else. So, but I do hope that you guys have yourself a fantastic rest of your week, and if I don't get to talk to you for a while, I'll see you in the next video. Have a good one.